Hey guys! Before we begin today's lesson, I wanted to update you and give you some more details about something we talked about last class and class before last. We talked recently about outlining lectures as something that was helpful to you guys learning. Many of you told me it kept you focused, it made you organize your thoughts about the lecture and make sure you were actually understanding things. And I know it keeps you honest about showing up on time and participating and paying attention because you have to submit on time. So, we're going to continue with you outlining lecture videos for every class where I post one. But we had a problem last time we did that. Somehow, across my 50-ish morality students, you guys found 1,000 different ways to submit papers to me, none of which were consistent, and all of which managed to simultaneously clog up my inbox in different ways, which must stop. I need my inbox back. So, I promised you I would update you on the best way to do this, and going forward, I'm going to give you some instructions and I'm going to expect you to follow them on how I want you to submit these outlines. And again, thank you for bearing with me, for your patience as I figure out how to do this whole YouTube classroom thing. And also thank you for your flexibility, because I'm going to ask you to do it one way, and it might not be your favorite way, and I'm going to have you do it anyway, so thank you in advance for working with me. Here's what I found. Most of your submissions were one of three things. Either you were writing a YouTube comment right there in the box, writing a Google Doc, and then sharing it with me, sometimes giving me 2 or even 3 different emails, one with permission, one with changed permission, one to tell me you had given me permission, etc. Or 3, you were working on paper, which leads to its own problems because then you found 1,000 different ways to get from paper to some kind of digital file to put in my inbox. Sometimes in 2 or 3 emails just to email 2 or 3 photos. So, here are my thoughts. Here's what I figured out. 1, it's kind of silly to just work in a YouTube comment, because then you only have the document in one place. You only have information in one place. It's hard to go back and review it. And if something goes wrong with, say, that web page, then you no longer have access to your information. So I'm going to ask, if you're working on a computer, that you use a Google Doc. Don't worry, there'll be an easy way to put that into a YouTube comment for me. But this way you have your notes organized. You can edit them. You can put them into a folder. You can put an appropriate title on your doc, like, say, JR number 11 lecture notes, and put them in a folder full of lecture notes from our morality class, which I'm sure all of you are doing. If you were working on paper, then here's how I'd like you to proceed. In as many photos as you need, when you're done taking your notes, you're going to photograph them, and you're going to bring your file into a Google Doc. And then I only have one place I have to look, and it's always going to be a Google Doc, whether it has text or photos in there. I'm looking at one standard file type, and it's always one you can organize and keep track of. Now here's the cool part. You can leave a link to a Google Doc in the YouTube comment. So, no matter what, every single person, every single time you see a lecture video, is going to take an outline, make sure, one way or another, that outline ends up in a Google Doc, and then you're going to comment on the relevant YouTube video the link to that doc. Now here's the important part. Don't share it and put in my email. That's where things get messy on my end. You're still going to click the little sharing box in the top right corner, the little blue box. You're still going to share. But you're not going to just put in my email address and hit send. And you're certainly not going to give me editing access if you don't want me going in and changing your notes. Instead, after clicking share, in the box where you would normally put my email, you're going to click the little link, small and gray, in the bottom right-hand corner that says Advanced. And that's going to let you change the permissions of your doc without sending me a whole bunch of emails. Originally, your doc is going to be set to private. You're the only person who can see it. You're going to find the line that says private, and you are going to change the fact that your doc is private. And you're going to change link sharing, which will currently be set to off, to on. Now here's the interesting thing. You're going to have like 4 different options for what kind of link sharing on you choose, and I don't care which one you choose. Some of them will only give it to people with a link or people in our domain email address. Doesn't matter to me because I'm going to be all of those people. But that's the procedure from now on. And I know it's not the most efficient procedure for some of you, and it's a little inconvenient if you're doing paper, but hey, paper's always a little inconvenient these days. But this is what I'm going to ask you to do. Get your outline into a Google Doc so you can organize it for yourself. And then follow these steps down this side. Share, advanced, change, on. That will let me review your docs at my leisure without blowing up my inbox, so that I can look and give you lots of easy credit for class participation and just paying attention and taking notes. If that's not working for you, shoot me an email from your school email address to mine and we'll figure out why. But for everyone else, I'm expecting that you're going to do that around the time the lecture ends every class period. Thank you so much again for your flexibility and for your careful attention to following these instructions, and for your patience while I'm still getting this figured out. See you soon. Hello, welcome back to our morality class. Today, we're going to start a new section. So if you're taking notes in a paper notebook, turn to a new page and put a new heading. If you're taking notes in a long-running Google Doc, start a new doc or a new folder, whatever it is you need. We're going to begin the 5th commandment today. Now, this is one you know, it's a short one, and it sounds like it's going to be an easy one. But in fact, what we're going to find over the course of today's lecture and the next 2 lectures is that it's a little more involved than it looks like at first blush. So, let's begin with the 5th commandment. You shall not kill. That seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? Don't kill. Easy as could be. But right away, we're going to start noticing a little bit of difficulty if we don't take the time to define some terms and figure out what it is we're talking about. I'm going to guess that most of you have something like hand sanitizer or Clorox wipes somewhere nearby. Check it out. Take a look at the bottle and the label on it. I bet they very proudly advertise that they kill 99 point, I don't know how many nines, % of germs and bacteria. Are they killing? Weren't we just told not to do that? So maybe we don't use things like that, hand sanitizer and, well, soap, which does the same thing even better, right? But wait, then aren't people going to get sick from the bacteria and the germs and the virus and such going around? So aren't we killing them by not killing the other thing? Is it just not possible to not kill? If you're feeling like this just got thorny and complicated and even incoherent fast, you're right. It's because we haven't taken the time to define our terms. What I'm going to need you to trust me on for a minute, and it'll make a lot of sense as we get deeper and deeper into it, is that we're going to limit this commandment to human life. When we talk about the 5th commandment, when we talk about you shall not kill, we're talking about you shall not kill humans. You shall not murder might be a more helpful translation or rendering of this text. Now, if that feels speciesist, well, as we develop these ideas, it'll become very, very clear that this is logical, consistent, and makes a lot of sense, and we'll show you why it's got to be that way. And no, if you're worrying that, well, then does that mean the church or our faith is somehow totally okay with, say, animal cruelty because this is only about human life? No, that's not what I'm saying, and that's not what this commandment says. But we are going to limit this discussion for purposes of this commandment to human life. And I'm going to show you how that's logical, and we're going to show you how that works. And what I'm going to show you is that there's more to it than you might initially think. So, if we're going to make sense of this commandment not to murder, not to take human life, we need to take a step back and think about what is human life. Now, this could be a big philosophical discussion with lots of musings and ponderings and poetic reflections, but we don't need it to be because you already have extensive notes in your book about what human life is. Oh yeah, we covered this in September. And I'm sure you remember all of your notes from September. It was right at the beginning of the 2nd unit. We did a whole 5-class thing on anthropology. What does it mean to be human? The study of man, right? Anthropos, anthropology. We read Genesis 1, 2, and 3. We looked at human nature. We looked at it from both a scriptural and a philosophical perspective. And I'm sure you have access to your notes from that unit. So take a minute if you need and pause the video and go back and brush up. What you're looking for, by the way, is a big Venn diagram in your notes that distinguished between soul and body, angels and animals. And what we found is that humanity is the intersection point, the overlapping center section of those two circles on your Venn diagram. To be human, rather than anything else in the universe, is distinctly to consist in both a soul and a body in union with one another. Your dog has a body. So does a tree. So does a stone. Those are bodies. They're physical. They can be studied by science. They can be studied by physics or biology or chemistry or whatever the relevant hard scienceology is. They're physical. They have physical properties. But they don't necessarily have a soul in the strict sense that we mean soul. That's not to mean they don't have some animating principle, but they don't have an eternal soul with full rational capacity of, say, expression through language of truth and beauty the way we do. And angels are precisely the opposite. They do not have physical properties. They don't have matter or mass or limited physical energy in a way that makes them subject to science. This is where philosophy is much more helpful, and really theology, in articulating these abstract and non-physical concepts, ideas, and yes, realities, living realities. They're eternal. They're not subject to change. They're not subject to time and space in the same way that bodies are. They're sort of abstract in a way, but they are intelligent, and they participate in knowledge of the truth. And that's really going to be a lot of their function. Humans, it becomes immediately apparent, are the only things that have both. They're the only things that have, say, bodies, but that also can perform abstract, logical, philosophical, and scientific inquiries into what it means that we have bodies. We're unique in that way. And what it means to be alive as a human is to have a body and soul that are united. Now, I want to take a moment and read for you a couple of verses from Scripture that help us wrap our head around this concept. We're using the Big Bible today. It's my Latin and English parallel Dewey-Reams translation. Sometimes it's nice to go old school. So, a couple of verses for you. First, in Genesis chapter 1, this is at the end of creation in 7 days. This is day 6. I'm in chapter 1, verse 26 and following. And God said, "Let us make man to our image and likeness, and let him have dominion over the fishes of the sea, and the fowls of the air, and the beasts, and the whole earth, and every creeping creature that moveth upon the earth." And God created man to his own image. To the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. And God blessed them, saying, "Increase and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fishes of the sea, and the fowls of the air, and all the living creatures that move upon the earth," etc., etc., skipping down a bit. And God saw all the things he had made, and they were very good. And the evening and morning were the 6th day. And now, skipping ahead, I'm looking into chapter 2, starting in verse 7, and I'll skip a bit soon. "And the Lord God formed man of the slime of the earth, and breathed into his face the breath of life, and man became a living soul." See, there's that first forming body, here slime, our translation that we used in class, dust, and then breath, spirit, living soul. And following up on that later, a few verses ahead, looking at verse 21. "Then the Lord God cast a deep sleep upon Adam," remember, Adam, man, same thing, "upon Adam, and when he was fast asleep, he took one of his ribs and filled up flesh for it. And the Lord God built the rib, which he took from Adam, into a woman, and brought her to Adam. And Adam said, 'This now is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Wherefore a man shall leave father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall be two in one flesh.'" We talked at length about those verses and what they meant as well. For the remainder of this series, for these lectures on the 5th commandment, you must have in your mind What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be alive as a human? Body, soul, in union with one another, together. Made in the likeness and image of God, made by God's own hand, breathed in with God's own spirit into us. That means, by the way, this is a big deal. We talked about humanity as the image of God, as the reflection of God, and I gave you that, I think, helpful analogy back in September. How you treat an image of someone tells us something about how you respect or feel towards or, well, disrespect that person. How do you treat the image of someone you love if you have a photograph of them? How do you treat the image of someone you disdain? How you treat other people, especially as regards their life and death, is going to have immediately major spiritual ramifications because we are talking about images of God. This definition of human life, the union of body and soul, shows us right away, by implication, what we mean by death. And that's going to be key to understanding what we mean by the word kill in the commandment, you shall not kill. What is death? It is the violent separation of body from soul. It's violent. It's unnatural. By the way, a quick aside, think about what the word violence means. If you're thinking about fists or guns or bombs, you're not wrong, but you're using a very limited sense of the word. Take it a little abstract for me. Take it out of strictly, carnal applications. Violence is applying force to something against its nature. Anytime you are violent towards something, you violate it. It has a purpose, it has an intention, it has a design. And when you forcefully go against that design or that purpose, you are violent towards it. What I am claiming when I call death violent is the same thing as calling death unnatural. It is not what we are made for, to die. In the beginning, when God made man and woman in the garden, they could eat from the tree of life and they did not die. We are not made to die. It is not in our nature to die. And the fact that we die is a consequence of sin. Sin is violence against human nature. We were designed with a purpose. That purpose is both to reflect God and to love God. Really, that is just to reflect God, right? God is love, and we are a reflection of love, not only insofar as we receive his love, but as we give it back. When we fail to reflect God's love, to receive and give God's love, that's violence against our nature. That's sin. All sin is violence. Death is a violation of human nature. It's not natural that we die. It's not just a course of nature. It's not just biology. It's not just natural selection at work. That only talks about the body, but it fails to acknowledge the soul. You need to keep track of the soul as well. The separation of body from soul as a result of sin is what we mean by death. And, by the way, this should immediately help us understand why we need to distinguish between human death and, say, animal or bacterial or other single-cellular organism death. Those don't have the same kind of soul from which to separate a body. The animating principle is intrinsic to the body for them, whereas it's not for us. Death for an animal is, in a certain sense, natural. It's biology taking its course. But humans are more than mere biology, and so it's unnatural for us insofar as we participate in that angelic rationality of having a soul. Death is the violent or unnatural separation of body from soul. That's what it means in the case of a human being. Therefore, our definition for kill is pretty straightforward. It's anything that separates the body from the soul. Don't forget the soul when we talk about death. That will make a lot of things make sense. And if you try to forget about the soul and pretend it's just bodies, well, a lot of this isn't going to work. Keep your eye on the soul. You shall not kill means here, you shall not separate man's body from his soul. You shall not separate the soul and the body. That would be violent. It would be unnatural in the sense of against what our purpose is. We can't fully reflect God's glory when we're broken down into pieces. We don't work that way. God made us to be body and soul together. But wait, what about if there's a specific special kind of case you're worrying about right now and thinking, isn't there some kind of exception for abortion, euthanasia, war, suicide, self-defense, capital punishment, whatever else it may be? Hold off. We will talk about those. We'll do whole lectures on those. In fact, those special topics are what lectures 2 and 3 in the series are going to be for, once we've understood the necessary philosophical ideas to talk about them intelligently. So today, leave those concerns aside. We're going to talk in general about human nature and what it means to be violent, or really nonviolent, towards human nature. And later, we will get into each of those topics I just named. Don't worry. Now, I need you to think back. Don't worry, not as far as September this time. Just to, say, 3 weeks ago or so. In lecture JR number 3, was it? Maybe 4? It was the one about the cell of society and how that is, in fact, the family, not the individual. We established there a philosophical principle that's going to be useful here. What's good for the parts is good for the whole. You remember last time we did that talking about a house and about an organism, and we used to define the purpose of a government or the organizing principle of a society is to protect families. But that principle applies here as well. What's good for the whole is what's good for the parts. If the parts of a human being are the soul and the body, and the fact that those are united with one another, then respecting each of those 3 things is going to be necessary to respecting the human person, to treating that image of God with the great level of dignity they deserve. Now, the obvious case is the one we all think of right away when you hear, do not kill. Well, don't violently rip body and soul apart. Strictly speaking, don't do things that kill people. That's obvious and that's true, but there's also going to be more to it than that. See, to respect that union, you also have to respect its constituent parts. If you want to respect human dignity, you must treat the body with respect. If you want to respect human dignity, you must treat the soul with respect. You have to care for each of those in order to care for both of those. So, it's that time where we're going to break out our catechism and read a little bit. I'm going to start in paragraphs 2288 through 2291, although there are a few other relevant paragraphs that we'll mention along the way. The section is entitled, Respect for Health. Life and physical health are precious gifts entrusted to us by God. We must take reasonable care of them, taking into account the needs of others and the common good. Let those sink in. Take reasonable care while watching out for the common good. That's about the body, and that's about the health of the body. See, health is just the situation where the body is working well. Now, in our society, we tend to think of health as the opposite of disease, right? When you're sick, you go to the doctor until you're healthy again. And medicine is how you get back from sick up to healthy. And that's part of it. There is a real Christian charism of medicine. Nurses and doctors caring for people, restoring physical health. Those miracles, by the way, are part of who Jesus was, right? Restoring health. It's in his nature. And it is a noble and distinctly Christ-like vocation to care for health. Please also note, it does say reasonable care. We don't put health on a pedestal. We don't worship it. It's not the most important thing. There is an element of moderation there. See, if you obsess over health or make physical health the most important thing, you do so at the expense of care of the soul. So, reasonable concern. And also the common good. Your health can't come at the expense of other people's healths. You don't get to make other people sick to make yourself healthy. reasonable care for the common good. You can't just respect your body. You have to respect the human body. Yours, his, hers, mine, the other person's, etc. Now, please note, there's another aspect to health, and it's not just the opposite of disease. It's also a well-functioning body. Calibrated, balanced, able to perform, to do body things well. That's going to have specific implications for what we can and can't do. Let me read for you a little further along in our catechism. The virtue of temperance. Oh, we've studied that before, haven't we? The virtue of temperance disposes us to avoid every kind of excess, the abuse of food, alcohol, tobacco, or medicine. Those incur grave guilt who, drunkenness, love of speed, etc., endanger others or themselves. Overeating is a violation of the 5th commandment. Overdrinking is a violation of the 5th commandment. And I'm willing to posit as well, an utter lack of exercise, of using your body, is a violation, in a minor or indirect way, of the 5th commandment. For your body to work well, for it to be healthy, you need to get up and move it sometimes. You need to train it a little bit. You need to discipline it a bit. You need to give it food, but not a lot, not too much, and not all the time. Doing so is a respect for your own human dignity. You do actually have to care for your own health. I'll point out at this point, we're in the middle of a national health crisis. And our government is taking great pains. Some people say over-exaggerated pains. That's a fascinating debate I'm not going to get into. To protect the health of its various citizens. That's a good goal. That's a good intention, even if the practical details aren't perfect. Respecting the health of individual people, of yourself and others, by taking reasonable precautions and taking reasonable active efforts, like being physically active, is expected. That's just a matter of justice, of respect. You were given a gift, a body. You need to appreciate it. Other people were given a gift. You don't get to diss it. It reflects God. Care for health. I'll go further. The use of drugs inflicts very grave damage on human health and life. Their use, except on strictly therapeutic grounds, is a grave offense. There's something wrong with drug use, just like there's something wrong with heavy alcohol or tobacco use. You don't get to destroy your body. It's not a toy you were given to have fun with until you break it. It's not some resource you were given to use up and consume until you see fit to dispose of it. It is an artwork, handcrafted by God himself, through the entire process of creation going all the way back to the beginning. And it deserves to be treated as this beautiful, unique masterpiece that it is, and that means proper maintenance as well as proper appreciation. By the way, there's another paragraph. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. It's about respect for bodily integrity. It's 2297. Fascinating the things they lump together here. Kidnapping, hostage-taking, terrorism, torture, amputations, mutilations, and sterilizations. All of those things go together. They're all violations of bodily integrity. The whole body is made to go together. An interesting aside for you. Historically, the church has been rather down on tattoos. Now, they're not forbidden. It's not like tattoos are necessarily moral evil, but there is a very legitimate moral suspicion of tattoos. And the reason is that they may convey an incorrect attitude about the body. My body, my choice. You do you. I get to express myself however I want. It's my body, and if I want to treat it like a canvas on which to display artwork, I will. Those attitudes are not compatible with our faith. Sure, there might be good cause to get a tattoo, but that attitude is not good cause. Your body is not something you get to use however you feel like. It is a reflection of God, and it comes with its own expectations, its own guidelines, its own user manual, if you will, right? In particular, I want to spend a minute on an aside about the line about mutilations. Sensitive subject. What about transgenderism? This is one you guys have asked me about in class before, and this lesson on the 5th commandment is the appropriate place to address it. Genital mutilation is still mutilation. The sex/gender you received at your conception, where your parents gave you your genome and your body, and God infused it with a human soul, is not something you get to violate. It was given to you. It's a gift. You appreciate it. You respect it. When every single cell in your body is programmed to be XX or be XY, performing surgery and pumping drugs into your body to try to tell those cells they're wrong about who they are, is an act of violence against your nature. Think back to our lines from Genesis. Male and female, he created them. The maleness and the femaleness of someone is part of who they are. The whole idea that your sex is over here, but your gender is over there, and it's totally socially constructed, and the biology doesn't have to do with the identity, doesn't make sense with our faith. For that to be true, you have to believe that the body and the soul are radically divorced from one another. You have to treat humanity as if it's already almost, dead. Sex and gender, same thing, go together. They have to, otherwise it doesn't make sense for us to have a united body and soul. Need to be respected. Someone who feels that they have the wrong one, that must be a very painful and very confusing feeling. That must be dark. They must be suffering. My heart goes out to them. But that doesn't mean the right thing to do is to take a scalpel to yourself and try to fit yourself to your own expectations. Sorry. Doesn't work. In addition to caring for the body, the 5th commandment requires us to care for the soul, both your own soul and the souls of others. In the last commandment, we talked about caring for your health and the health of other people as part of care for the common good. That also applies to their souls. Now, there's one general category, general term we're going to use to describe care or lack of care for other people's souls. And that word is one we've already discussed. We talked about it earlier in the course in January, if I'm not mistaken. We talked about scandal. Now, please, if you think scandal means when celebrities do something wrong and the papers report on it with lots of detail, that's not what we mean. That's a very shallow and really basically incorrect understanding of the word. It's a theological term from the Greek skandalizein, to trip, as if someone is running and you stick out your foot in front of them and watch them fall on their face. To cause someone to stumble. Catechism of the Catholic Church 2284. Scandal is an attitude or behavior which leads another to do evil. The person who gives scandal, who scandalizes, becomes his neighbor's tempter. He damages virtue and integrity. He may even draw his brother into spiritual death. Scandal is a grave offense if by deed or omission another is deliberately led into a grave offense. 2 phrases I want to highlight there. Attitude or behavior, deed or omission. You can scandalize people by what you say and do. Those are deeds. You can scandalize people, by what you fail to say or fail to do. And it's a behavior or an attitude. I'll come back to that point at the end. Every time a human being commits a sin, they do violence against their own nature, against the reflection of the divine nature in them, against human nature at large. Sin is self-harm. And just like you would be deeply concerned about a friend or a neighbor or a family member who's committing physical acts of self-harm, you need to also be concerned about people who are committing spiritual acts of self-harm, and you need to not encourage or contribute to that. Scandal is when you make it easy for other people to sin, or you lead them to sin, or heaven forbid, you tell them it's okay to sin. Insofar as you have influence or authority over other people, your capacity for scandal increases. I'm reading to you now from 2285. Scandal takes on a particular gravity by reason of the authority of those who cause it, or the weakness of those who are scandalized. Who has a lot of influence or authority in our culture, in our society? I'm going to give you three answers. First, the obvious one, elected officials, and non-elected officials, right? The government, political power, military force, judicial rulings, police enforcement. All these various branches of the government have a very serious level of authority. When they use that authority to make it easy to sin or to encourage sin, they are responsible for the sins committed. They do grave harm. Now, we have a government that is very committed to protecting our physical health in the course of this crisis. Is it also committed to protecting our spiritual health? Is it also protecting individuals and families from the kinds of vices that might destroy a family? One example that comes immediately to mind is alcoholism. Good thing liquor stores are deemed non-essential and closed for the crisis, right? Anyway. Another group that I want to point out as a specific group that has a large degree of influence in our culture are celebrities. And yes, that is a legitimate exercise of influence, of power, of a social authority. If you've read about them in a magazine but not met them, that's the person I mean. I don't care if they're pop culture media icons or professional athletes or Fortune 500 CEOs who get profiled in Forbes magazine. Those are all who I mean by celebrities. And let me point out, scandal, 2286 here, scandal can be provoked by laws or institutions, the government authority we just talked about, or by fashion or opinion. Pop culture, style, what's trending is also a matter of scandal. Therefore, continuing, they are guilty of scandal who establish laws or social structures leading to the decline of morals and the corruption of religious practice or social conditions, etc., that make obedience to the commandments difficult. If you have people looking at you and you behave badly, you lead those people to behave badly. This happens often, I think, really in professional sports, right? I never meant to be a role model. I never said I'm a role model. Why are they looking at my personal life? Of course they're looking at your personal life. You're famous. You're on the cover of magazines. You're on the little baseball cards the kids trade. I wonder if they still do that nowadays. They are looking at you. You must behave well in front of them. Because when you influence young people, even if it wasn't your intention to influence young people to do evil instead of do good, you are responsible for their sins. That is an act of spiritual violence. Now, we live in a culture that cares deeply about physical nonviolence. But does it care about spiritual nonviolence? Spiritual nonviolence would require that insofar as you have influence in a society, you make sure to behave well, and when you do behave badly, you resign quickly and quietly and hand over your influence to someone who will lead people to the good. When you feel responsible for your actions and whether or not they make other people more likely to follow the commandments to be moral. Do the social leaders, aka celebrities and pop culture icons in our country, have it in your best interest to make you a morally good person? That's a real concern. There's a particular group of people in our culture, in addition to political authority, in addition to social authority, who wield huge influence over our culture. And they're teachers. Not because we wield a high level of visibility, I get seen by 40 kids a day? Nor because we wield a high level of power. I mean, half an hour after school for not being in the right shirt. It's not exactly military or judicial. But because they work with a vulnerable, influenceable population. Young people. Elementary school, middle school, and yes, even at high school. You are largely being shaped by the people you look up to, even if you don't necessarily admire them. Just watching who's who, what are they like, how do they act, who do you want to be like, who do you not want to be like. Your teachers exhibit a long-term influence on a whole community, because they do this year after year after year with people in the same locale. That means anyone who works as a teacher needs to be very, very careful about scandal. If I get up and tell you that it's perfectly okay to say, I don't know, drink to excess, even though you're underage, and as long as you don't get behind the wheel of a car, it's no big deal to go and drink and party, I am guilty of grave scandal. Because that's not true, that's not accurate, it's not okay for you to get drunk. You commit a serious sin when you get drunk. Both because of what it does to your body, but also because of what it does to your soul and your ability to relate to others responsibly and to care for others. But it's not just what I say to you explicitly. I am capable of scandalizing students. Teachers are always capable of scandalizing students, not just by explicitly teaching them evil things, but again, scandal can be provoked by fashion or opinion. Scandal is a grave offense if by deed or omission. Scandal is an attitude or behavior. If I were to get up here and not talk about the difficult topics, like one I talked about earlier, I would be doing something wrong. That's why I bring up hard topics. It's not because I'm looking to pick a fight or upset some of you guys. I have a moral obligation to teach you the whole truth, and I am trying to give you the whole truth, not just the parts that are comfortable or politically correct or appropriate. I have an obligation, specifically as someone who's teaching you morality, to give you the whole thing. Teachers, extremely sensitive to scandal, because if they walk into the classroom with the wrong attitude or just not willing to touch on certain topics, they can really lead people astray. They can really lead people into thinking something is no big deal just because they never address it. That's dangerous. If you care about the state of other people's souls, it is a terrifying responsibility to be a teacher. So take it easy on us sometimes, please. One last thought about scandal. Politicians, political authorities, governmental authorities, even the appointed and not elected, they have serious power in our culture, but they do not have absolute power in our culture because we're a democracy. They report to you, the registered voter and the taxpayer and the citizen. That means every time you exercise your right to vote, because of course you would never sit out an election because my vote doesn't count, because not only is that just not true, it's a dereliction of your fourth commandment duties, which we talked about previously, right? You need to participate. So given that you understand you do have to participate in elections, you must vote your conscience, not just your politics. See, if you vote for someone who's going to make it easy for people to sin, if you're going to vote for someone who's going to enact legislation that is going to make some immoral thing totally legal, you have scandalized the country. You have scandalized your neighbor. You have a moral responsibility as a citizen, and in particular as a voter, to care for the souls of the governed by means of who you vote into governing office. We got one party that's pretty okay with killing people, as long as they're not like from our society or culture or citizens of our country, or as long as they've committed the crime. We got another party that's pretty okay with, killing people as long as they've not yet been born, and letting them perform all sorts of violence, right, to themselves. Neither one's got it perfect. Be careful who you vote for. You have a serious obligation to vote what is right for people's souls, not just for their bodies. You can't just vote in the best taxpayer benefits. It doesn't work. Gotta care for souls and bodies. Quick review. Big ideas. You shall not kill, talking specifically about human life, where death means the violent separation of body from soul, and kill means, first and foremost, to enact that separation, to do something that actually kills somebody. Yeah, that's bad, don't do it. But it also means to act violently against the human nature, which means to act badly against bodies, yours or others, or against souls, yours or others. You need to take good care of your body. You need to care about the health of your neighbor's body. You need to care about your soul, and you need to care about your neighbor's soul. And your actions, in terms of what you do, what you don't do, what you say, who you influence, and how, must meet that standard. They must respect both the great, beautiful dignity of the human body as a work of art that reflects God himself, not just as a you do whatever you want with a thing, but also for their soul as a reflection of the divine mind. That's a high standard. Next class, and the class after, I'll give you some principles about how we deal with specific kinds of hard cases. But it's all based on this idea here. Body and soul, each flourishing and united. All needs to be respected with the beautiful and ridiculously high level of dignity that is appropriate to a reflection of God himself. See you guys in the live stream to discuss. God bless.